Pulse. We just about made it, didn't we, Yoshi? Because we've had a busy day today. We've been at
Mhm.
the AACE conference, I think,
Mhm.
which was pretty good. We had some great speakers there, including Alan Mosca from Implants. So if he's tuning in, hello, Alan. And did us the favor on our lunch break of giving us our first ever um, in person podcast, which was pretty cool. What did you think? Did you enjoy it?
Yeah, I much prefer it in person. Definitely.
Yeah, the dynamics are different, aren't they? I think it's okay with two people online, but when you get three, you have to kind of all wait for each other to finish, etc. So it's
Yeah, and
quite nice
you can kind
actually.
of read body language as well, and it makes things a bit easier. When you're online, you just have to rely on people's voices as such.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
so it definitely helped with the flow of the conversation. And we talked about some really cool stuff as well.
Yeah, well, that episode will be coming out. I don't know, maybe in a couple of weeks, but we'll
Hmm.
keep everyone informed. But it was a really great conversation, as it always is with Alan Mosca. If you don't follow Alan, definitely worth following. We also have some big news. We have our website up and running now, so you don't have to go to different places for the podcast and for the newsletter. And we've acquired a pretty cool domain. Um, it's well, do you want to give the game away, Yoshi, on the domain?
Project Flux.ai.
Yeah, how cool is that? We spent more money than we should have on the Project
Yeah, big
Flux.ai,
surprise.
but yeah, but it wasn't cheap, was it? And it was worth it, I think. Getting Project Flux.ai. It was
You've got to,
we
haven't you?
can't.
You've got to commit.
You have to commit. You have to commit. So yeah, check out www.projectflux.ai. It's still kind of a work in progress, but anyone listening, let us know what you think, how we can improve it. We're going to add to it as we go. And the other big news, which I'm not sure anyone will really care about, but we'd be interested to hear if you can notice is different, is those watching on YouTube or live now will see we've got some pretty cool new microphones.
Microphones and
So
cameras, to be fair. Your camera looks pretty sweet.
yeah, so we are trying to make things better for everyone to listen to and watch us on YouTube. So we've actually invested in these. So I think this now makes us official podcasters, right?
Yeah, so now everyone will hate us.
Yeah, yeah. So now you can officially hate us and laugh at us because we are officially podcasters because we spent bucks on some pretty cool microphones. And you're probably thinking I don't hear any difference. That's fine. That means the old ones were just as good. But that means we have been really busy doing all that, especially in our weekend and what have you. So it's kind of cool that it's been a bit of a quiet week on the AI front. Would you say there's not major announcements to talk about?
No, not major announcements. I think Google have released a few things which are pretty cool and might be groundbreaking. But China have come out with again some new stuff, right?
Yeah.
Not quite in the newsletter because it was kind of yesterday and today, so we might not cover it. But it was a quiet front in the past week, I'd say.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, there is still, as always, there's still stories to talk about. But you just
Mm.
want to talk about, I mean, we'll cover it more next week, but the big news from China then.
So I think it was a company called Badu. So they're a Chinese tech company, and they've just released a new version of their Ernie model, which is comparative to GPT 4.5 at 1% of the cost. Now, we don't want to jump the gun and say, they're doing it at using very cost-effective methods because we know DeepSeek wasn't exactly truthful in that sense, even though it was, still cost-effective. But again, it brings the global AI race uh, to one which is more focused on building models which are more cost effective and accessible for people to use.
Yeah, exactly. And it's such a good point. It's really difficult to know what to believe from China, except for they're obviously hotting up the game with all these releases. You had the
Mhm.
Manus release was China as well, wasn't it? The one we talked
Yeah, but
about
they're not
last week.
shy of using Western models, right? So Manus was built on Claude 3.7,
Yeah,
so they're not shy about that. They just do it. I think they're just focused on the output, and I
yeah.
think it's working because it's shaking the movement within the West.
Yeah, so we'll cover that more because we haven't had a chance to really grasp on that. That is like
Yeah.
hot off the press. The things we do want to cover, there's a few stories. Let's start with OpenAI
Mhm.
because um, this is interesting for people to know what's happening behind the scenes because they've released a whole bunch of new agent tools and they're mainly for developers, right? But this is going to give people the opportunity to create, like really take creating agents to the next level. So they the new releases include three built-in tools. There's a web search, a file search, and a computer use.
Hmm.
And then there's two powerful developer tools, which is an API, basically APIs, and an agent SDK. So what these basically do is they make AI more proactive, and enables them to be used for agents. So for developers looking at use cases within project delivery, for instance, it's just going to make that jump to actually creating these things a lot easier.
Hmm.
S-
I
So I
think
don't know if you had a chance to look at this story in any more detail than
no,
that.
no, no, no. So I have looked at it briefly, and I think part of the angle was that agents are supposed to be the thing in 2025.
Yeah,
Equally, I think big tech, and other companies who are building agentic workflows and systems are concerned of adoption because it is the next level of adoption. It's not just using a single LLM. It's using, these multi-agent workflows, which can drive you a lot more output. Now, even though they can hide a lot of the agentic workflow on the back end, the the information and the contextual terminology is still seeping into the public domain. So it does sound like it's a lot. Now, because that's a problem, being able to give it in the hands of the developers means
mm,
they can more easily implement it within their businesses. And that's
yeah,
what they're doing here.
exactly.
So when
That's the
they
main thing.
mentioned deep research and they mentioned operator, right? They're
Yeah,
two forms of agentic workflows, agentic systems. So what OpenAI are doing are basically saying to developers, well, you can build your own deep research agents and your own operators within your companies. So it knocks down that wall of informational concerns and just makes it easier for companies to actually play and build with it. So there's more trust, right? If you're a company and you have your own teams implementing solutions, you've hired these people to do things for you, you're more likely to trust what they say because they work for you.
yeah,
So I think
absolutely.
that's kind of the angle, and I think it's looking to tick off that this minimal amount of adoption so far in 2025.
Do you think this is a response to Manus? Because we went through Manus last week, and OpenAI. I mean, the stakes are really high, and they've got to get this right. So they're trying to make the barriers to entry, from what I can see, as low as possible for developers. So they don't have to go and use things like Manus. They can build their own. Is
Yeah,
there part of that there, or do you think it's just coincidence that this has been released literally a week after Manus
I
has
think
made waves? Of course, though, ChatGPT had Operator, which they so it's probably a bit of a coincidence because I think they've been on this anyway.
Yeah, the thing is, I think a lot of these companies move on the same front,
Yeah,
right? So
yeah,
they're all closely aligned in terms of what they're doing. Even though they might not speak to each other, you can kind of sense the vibe that a lot of them are working on similar things. So we had this discussion about homogeneity, right, earlier today, which was,
yeah,
a lot of these companies doing the same thing. Or where is the innovation coming from? What's the USP? So I think there is this level of convergence where people can predict what the others are going to do. And that's why they're all kind of doing the same thing.
yeah,
But you notice when they've got their things like their agents SDK, that will allow developers to actually implement, monitor, debug solutions so you can keep it within the OpenAI framework. So a lot of them are wanting to keep you within their ecosystem. Now the interesting conversation here is there's been a lot of discussion about there being no moat. There's no moat for some of these companies, right?
yeah,
It's really easy. Switching costs are incredibly low, so you can just transit. I mean, in any domain, right? From kind of your IDEs or like AI code editors, to typical chatbots, to any other generative AI solution that you want to use, the switching costs are low.
yeah,
So I
yeah,
think
yeah.
how do you keep people within your ecosystem? You have to build products which are frictionless,
Frictionless.
frictionless, and are also easy to just move and play around with, and the interfaces are quite easy. The user experience is quite easy. I think that's how you
Yeah,
build people, and also with the trust and the competency front.
yeah.
So
And then
Anthropic are doing that quite well.
well, it's interesting to talk about Anthropic. So another story we got is about the Claude's Harmony feature, but also that goes alongside the part of these tools from OpenAI. They got the responses API, and that includes this like file search utility. So effectively, you
Yeah.
can set it to scan across companies' databases to retrieve information, which is similar to what this Claude Harmony is doing. So
Mhm.
we're moving into this arena, aren't we? Where we're trying to give agents the ability to scan over a certain file directory where you might hold information, so that it can use that as part of the agent, right?
Yeah, and
So
execute.
they're all doing the same thing effectively.
Yeah, and it'll allow it to execute. I mean, we saw the thing about MCPs the other day where you can actually have your large language models taking action in third-party tools directly and actually executing commands. So
Yeah,
that's the step they're going to be going in. But look, I mean, think of the name Harmony, right? Anthropic, they've called it Harmony. Why have they called it that? Again, because they have a brand image which is going to keep you within their system. You know, they're
Yeah,
trying to portray a sort of company which are doing things in the right way, and it sounds nice. Effectively, it connects into your local directory. But that
yeah.
name itself, you know, it aligns with their branding, and I think that's what companies are doing to
Yeah,
build.
you won't want to call it danger or something. We're letting you
Exactly.
have that. So there is a power play here, and they
Mhm.
all make fun of each other in terms of, oh, we're really bad at naming conventions, but a lot of this is intentional because they're trying to make sure that they don't scare people away. But what do people in so people listening to this, what do they need to know? Effectively, what you need to know from this story is that it's now going to be easier. All of the major providers are trying to make it easier to create agents. That's effectively the big takeaway, isn't it?
Yes,
Useful agents.
that's exactly it.
Cool.
And the good
So
thing is, and just quickly there, James, the good thing is that when you just use one to build agents, you know, one ecosystem or technology to build agents, the learnings can apply across the others. So actually, it
yeah,
helps you just to kind of trial out these different technologies or these different solutions and see which works best for you.
yeah. Which brings us to the next story, which is good. So, and this is all the stories this week really are around lowering uh, the kind of drawbridge to enable people to do stuff that they might have worried about before. So the next story is about something called the Google Gemma 3, which is built on the Gemini system. But
Hmm.
effectively, what this is doing, it's allowing you to create um, to actually run the models on your local server. So for those people who are particularly worried about security or what have you, you can start running now what is a multimodal LLM on your remote server. So if you've got an organization and you're worried about using these third-party tools and giving it information that you don't know where it's going to, or having to use it offline, that's what Gem. There's a few of them already available, and you can have like Llama and there's various other ones. The one we talked about last week, the Mistral one. But
Hmm.
the big difference with Gemma is that it's multimodal, and it can, which basically means it can understand text and images, and it can run locally. So
Hmm.
even the local models are getting better and better. So again, going back to the last story, this is just going to make it easier for organizations to be able to create agents and um, company specific models for them uh, locally so that they don't need to worry about the security risks of things going externally. Is that about right with that
Yeah.
story?
So I think what we can see here is a trend that, you know, typically sometimes we focus on unlocking new intelligence and there's more capabilities and AI's IQ has grown and et cetera, et cetera. But I feel like a lot of the stories this week, a pattern that we recognize is all about adoption. They want
Yes.
people to
Yeah.
adopt their technology, so they're making it cost effective, they're making it more private, they're making slightly some of them more vertical, they're improving the multimodality. So you can just see they're trying to get it in the hands of the people and to make it as easy to use. And we've seen this. I mean, we've just spoken about OpenAI, Anthropic, and Google, and they've all done similar things. And again, the pressure's coming in from China.
Yeah, but what this does for me is all of these things just take away the excuse of people to not
Yeah.
adopt AI because there's constantly a new iteration. Like before, it was said that it was going to be too expensive, too difficult to run these models locally. I don't know how big this Gemma one is, but it's probably what maybe 20 gig, and you can put it on a reasonably high performing PC or even on a virtual machine within
Mhm.
Azure or something, and then you've got your own local LLM. Amazing! How
Okay,
cool is that?
but so we say that, me and you say that it should be easier to run with these things and implement them and develop them. But if you actually try and read through a lot of the documentation and the things you're hearing, the terminologies, it does sound like a lot. So even though you can learn to implement these things, I still think there's a bit of a learning curve. And I think that's why some of the companies are turning away from using such technical terminologies.
Yeah, I get that. And for the people listening to this podcast, these are people who are presumably interested in this. And whilst you might not do any of this yourself, having the knowledge to be able to say to your CIO or your IT department, this is an option, is going to make you sound better, right? Because
You knowing what's
a lot,
possible, yeah.
yeah, and that's what we're trying to do with these stories is put it in the context for you to understand how you could do it yourself. Honestly, it is that easy. For instance, I've downloaded something called LM Studio that you can get on the Mac or Windows, and then you can create your own uh, local local model. So anyone could do it themselves. It's honestly not difficult. But it might be that just having that information, so next time you're in a meeting or a board meeting or a project meeting, you can say to somebody, hey, if you're dismissing using, say, ChatGPT because I don't want to upload the information to the internet, hey, did you know that actually you can run it locally? And Google have just released a new model that lets you basically do anything that you
Yeah.
could think of in terms of multimodal, and you can do it all locally. Your information is not going anywhere, and you can use it offline.
Yeah, so this kind of tempers the excuse around, the whole garbage in, garbage out thing with
Yeah.
AI. Like you shouldn't be using it until you have good data before you can put it in and actually leverage that. These new ways of harnessing technology kind of it does temper that narrative because you can create data using these things just using the data that these models have been trained on themselves.
Hmm.
And big tech are realizing this. We went to the Microsoft session a few weeks ago, and they were saying they were saving, X amount of money, in the millions within
Yeah, they were.
Microsoft. Meta had the 200,000 people layoffs, and now I'm just hearing that Amazon plans to terminate 14,000 managerial jobs to cost save $3.5 billion per year. So these big tech companies are going to be doing it. And I know that it's always good to focus on the benefits and why you should implement these things because you can do more. But there also is that fine line where if you don't actually do some of these things, there also is a risk. And I think
Yeah.
people need to at least understand the art of the possible of AI, even if they're not going to be implementing it or doing these things
Yeah,
themselves.
exactly. Yeah, just this is all about knowledge is power. So knowing what's out there, read the
Yeah.
newsletter, listen to this podcast. You'll know more than 95% of people out there and be able to talk knowledgeably about it. Interesting what you said about who was it who was making the redundancies.
This is Amazon.
Yeah.
And
Also,
funny
did you
enough,
know?
James, just on that, because I saw the news and then someone just commented, it was an X post. Someone commented
Yeah.
and they tagged in Perplexity. So Perplexity do this thing where if you tag them into an X post, so do Grok, it will reply with its actual findings and the results. So I checked that and someone did, and it actually did say, yeah,
So just how do people do that then? Those people using
so when you go onto
that's a
X,
really useful feature, I think.
yeah, so when you go onto X, you can, when you see a tweet or post, you can just reply to that and then tag in Perplexity or tag in Grok, and it will do the
As in
research
at
for you.
Perplexity or at Grok. Yeah.
Yeah, 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 and it will do the research for you, and it will reply to you at your post.
Cool.
So it's
Cool.
it's
Let's
awesome. So
see.
that's a cool way of using the tech as
A
well. So you're
nice,
just seeing more
a
and more.
nice
Yeah,
tip from Yoshi there for everyone. So we
yeah.
can put that into practice straight away. Cool. Just conscious of time because we have to sign off in a minute. So this is going to be a
Mhm.
relatively quick one. But let's go to the other story, which is about the Pentagon. So in terms of projects, like we often cover construction or energy, but we also try and cover different industries. And this time there's a story about military and the US Department of Defense integrating AI models into military decision making, right? I wanted to cover this because this gets me scared. Um, I can understand why they're doing it, but basically the Pentagon have said that, uh, this is around um, making sure that they're utilizing it in a safe manner and for critical workflows. I don't think it's talking about specifically about actually, you know, fighting on the ground or what have you.
Mhm.
That would really, really scare me. But they're certainly getting grips with it and trying to utilize AI agents in terms of assisting with things like planning or
Mhm.
logistics or threat assessments. But the the thing that worries me is that is this the thin end of a wedge? Because let's say they do that and it all becomes um, very effective at those particular use cases, then is the next case where we're going to start using it in warfare. And I think a lot of it is already being used in warfare. But then we really do get into this kind of space where we're letting machines decide on life and death situations.
You're kind of training them, right? Because
You're
I mean,
training
it
them,
does
yeah.
say here AI powered simulations. So
Yeah.
you can use the AI to help you predict certain scenarios. So in effect, it actually is already being used for military advantage
Yeah,
in
in
warfare.
simulations at the moment. So everything they've said in this announcement is more about using it for, like I say, planning logistics or simulations.
So the thing is, though, and this is kind of a hot take, but if we do leverage AI within this domain, within
Hmm.
military applications, it might reduce the number of human casualties you will have on the battlefield because you'll have a
Well, this is
proxy
it.
war effectively. So if there is tension and you do fight it with agents. I know agents here is a loose term because you can't using the word term agents in
I know.
warfare sounds like Terminator, right?
Well, it's or like Agent Bond or something.
Exactly. But I think there is that angle that you can look at it at. But it's just the notion of using these things within the battlefield we don't want to hear. But going back a few weeks, it was Google who rescinded that they weren't going to use AI within military applications, right? That was only a few weeks ago. So it doesn't surprise me. I mean, there's always going to be people are going to use AI in many different facets, and the military was always going to be one, in my opinion.
Well, it goes back, you raise an interesting point. So by using this, if it could actually save lives, there will be the odd accident or the wrong thing, but that happens in warfare already. And it was also what we were talking with Alan earlier about. So self-driving cars, people will focus on the one accident that a self-driving car has and said it's awful, forgetting the fact that it's like 100 times safer than a human-driven car. And it reminds me of that experiment that, if you've got a rail car going towards um, a five people stuck on a track, and you
Mm,
can divert it to one person stuck on the track. Should you do that or not? You're basically saving five lives for the sake of one. But
mm,
then the counter argument is, should we be making those decisions as humans at all, and should we be handing off those decisions to technology? It all gets really, really deep. And I think it's important within our newsletter and within Project Flux to talk about and not be afraid to talk about these things, because it does impact projects as well, because projects are unsafe, right?
mhm.
And there's too many casualties from projects. So I guess the parallel kind of hypothesis is, well, if we could start using AI to reduce health and safety, but part of that means that it might make the odd mistake where somebody is hurt, is it worth that? Is it, I'm
Yeah,
not
because
expecting you
humans
to
make
answer.
mistakes. I think this
More
was the discussion we
mistakes.
had earlier, right? We hold AI to a different standard than we do humans. We all make
Yes, we do.
mistakes and we effectively do hallucinate. A lot of our thoughts come from our mind, which is an abstraction of our neural networks and the perception and everything around us, right?
Yeah, yeah,
That isn't objectively true. If you're quite spiritual like me and you, James, everything you see is typically an illusion, right? So we still do hallucinate. We're just expecting these things to be amazing. And my argument was, whose fault is this? Not whose fault, but who do you put this responsibility onto? Is it people who build AI? Is it people like us who talk about AI and we do speak about the possibilities and it can do this and it can do that? So people then assume, oh well, it can do everything. It is this magic wand. Well, no, it's more the sharpened tool, which you have to have the person skilled up and trained on to use it effectively. So I think that's the question. But the other thing, just going back to the warfare bit, and what I'm trying to get at is you can have these things fighting a proxy war for you. So you haven't got people out in the battlefield fighting. You will have intelligence fighting on that behalf. So there is another ethical question around it. And there's kind of second order consequences around, if you do have a person and you have an agent who happens to be in physical AI form, what happens in that scenario? Because you've trained it to protect. But then you can look at the more positive element around cybersecurity. I mean, you can use military grade AI security to savor, or protect your data. So there is that positive element. It's a very soft topic, and we've actually not spoken about military applications of AI because we don't really want to dive into that stuff every now and then. But sometimes you're right; it does have to be said, and there's an extrapolation within product delivery in terms of what we can take
yeah.
away from stuff.
Hey, we got Rithwik's given us a fire comment. So hi Rithwik. At least we've got one person listening in live. Any questions before we sign off in a minute? I did want to just so that got quite deep. I want to get before we finish off. I want to get even
We
slightly
always do that
deeper.
when we go
Yeah,
off the agenda.
I know. But I want to. So Jeffrey Hinton, the godfather of AI, he's come up with this little piece. I just want to show. Let's see if I can
Mhm.
share this. Yeah, this should work. So, right, check this out. Let me know what you think of it, what he says here.
Because we're merging with AI. I mean, everybody seems to take the position there's human intelligence and then there's AI. We carry it around with us, but it's not really part of us. But we're actually going to merge with it. So you and me and everybody else is going to be a lot smarter than we were before. And you won't be able to tell. In fact, you won't be able to tell from yourself what's AI and what's part of you because it's part of yourself. Uh,
Does that require a human AI brain interface like Neuralink? Is that how it's going to happen?
It's not going to require surgery. I mean,
good.
So that's sorry, I told you the wrong, but that's not Jeffrey Hinton. That is Ray Kurzweil.
Ray Kurzweil, yeah.
Ray Kurzweil, who's the guy who did the Singularity is Near, an absolute hero of mine. So yeah, just thought that was really interesting. We put that in the newsletter because he's saying that it's inevitable, that it's not going to be us and them. It's all one, and we're just going to end up merging with AI. I know we're getting quite deep today, but I thought it was just quite interesting.
Yeah, I mean, so it that kind of negates the point around that negates Jeffrey Hinton's point. You know, when did you last see a more intelligent species be led by a less intelligent species? Well, if we converge, then we become one and of the same.
Exactly. So I think we'll leave people there. We covered an awful lot in a short space of time. We do have to go because we got another engagement to get to. But even though we said it was going to be a quiet week, not that quiet. There's still quite a lot happening. So we got the spotlight coming out on Friday.
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember who's on that, so that'll be a surprise for everyone.
And us.
And then, yeah, and us. And then we've got for those listening in live, this will go out as a podcast as well on Wednesday. And then tomorrow, which is Tuesday, we'll have our newsletter covering in a lot more detail all the stories that we've just discussed.
Awesome.
So cool, good stuff. We'll see everyone next week. But thanks for tuning in. Thanks, Rithwick, for the fire emoji, and we'll see everyone next week. Take care,
man.
Cool. That was good.
That was good. I actually quite like that we speak over what we